To ask you guys, first of all, I'm going to start with you, Dom.
Lovely.
What sort of person do you have to be a reviewer, to be a successful reviewer? I mean, does it mean you're a kind of a mega fan or just a gnarly, bitter old bastard?
Oh, I think it's both, really. I think you have to care enough about what you're writing about to actually put the effort in the first place. I mean, I think we've all read reviews where somebody's obviously just dashed it off in 10 minutes and they might as well have not bothered because nobody's learnt anything at the end of it or even enjoyed reading it. But I think, mega fan of music in general, I think is number one, really. But I think it also helps if you've got a rather inflated sense of your own importance and I don't tend to force my opinions down people's throats in real life because I'm quite quiet and a bit antisocial, but when it comes to writing, suddenly I get all this confidence from somewhere and I really feel I ought to be telling people what the reality about this album is and how they should acknowledge it now, that no other opinion is really worth having. I think you have to have strength in the conviction.
You have to have some strength of character. Alexis, how about you? What, gnarly old bastard?
Yeah. I agree with what Dom said, actually. I think you've got to have, it helps if you've got like a very wide knowledge of lots of different kinds of music. It helps if you know a lot about music, and it is to do with forthrightness of opinions, which I don't really, I don't really have that in my day-to-day life. It's like being a sort of stand-up comedian or something like that, isn't it? But you sort of run away before you know whether anybody laughs at the joke or not. You're sort of hidden behind this laptop. So yeah, I think those are the kind of you need to really like music. That definitely helps.
That would help.
And you need to think that what you're saying is right. You can tell more than what Dom said. I think you can tell when somebody's written something and they don't really believe it themselves.
Yes.
And that's quite important, that you don't worry too much about what other people have said about that record, that album. You just worry about your own opinions. There's a lot to be said for not reading other people's reviews, I think, before if you're going to review something. A lot to be said for it, because it's very easy to be kind of swept along by a critical consensus, I think. I tend to.
Yes, that's why it's quite important not to be standing in that sort of throng of critics at a gig and listening, being
also,
aware of
the music critics are just ghastly as well.
Well, exactly, you don't want to, they've got bad hygiene, they're pretty antisocial, they smell, they either drink too much or they just can't behave themselves really, so stay away from The perception is that it's a glamorous job, that we get free tickets to gigs, that we're, the centre of the social whirl. What's the reality, really? That you're, just a guy sitting in your underpants cracking out bitter reviews at home? I don't know. Tell us, what's the reality? You don't have to tell us about your underpants yet. We'll get to that later.
I'll save that for later. That's a treat for later on.
What's the reality, Dom?
I think it's both those things, really. Again, I mean, I've been doing it for 15 years now, and I've been to America 30-something times. I've been to Japan. I've been to Indonesia twice. I've been all over the place. But
you go on those rock cruises, don't you?
I've been on 3 rock cruises.
See, I'm not even big into rock, but I want to go on the rock cruise.
Yes, it's called 70,000 Tons of Metal. It's particularly good. It's fantastic. I was a mess after the end of all of them. The more you become established and the more you're kind of entrusted with bigger features by the magazines that you write for, then obviously those kind of things do come along. I mean, it's harder in the metal world, I think, than probably mainstream, pop music or anything, because the budgets aren't there. Or they were when I started the job, but now record labels are not going to send us abroad to interview their bands 99 times out of 100 because they don't have the money to do it. So I don't get sent to America. I used to go to America 3 or 4 times a year when I was purely freelance, and now, if I'm lucky, it's once. Well, it's terrible, and obviously
the wrong, false advertising.
Really been stitched up there. But actually, the reality of my shambolic and slightly pathetic life is that most of it is me sitting around in my pants with a laptop, you know, surrounded by piles of CDs that I'll never get a chance to listen to, and being sent, you know, 10 times the amount of music to download that I'll never get to listen to, which is great. I mean, obviously I'm not complaining about free music, but actually, no, I am. I am. There's too much of it, which means there's more awful stuff than there used to be. But it is, yeah, a lot of sitting and hacking things out at 2 in the morning, you know, propping your eyes open with matchsticks and trying to meet deadlines. Or as the more established I got and the older I got, the less I cared about those deadlines, and I just go, bollocks, you know, whatever. No, they've commissioned me to write it now. I'll hand it in when I'm done, you know. Which is you know, I've been at Metal Hammer for 8 years now, so they kind of know how I operate. So it's fun.
Guys on the freelancing course, don't listen to this man, all right? I'm trying to teach them something totally different. How about you, Lauren? What's the reality for you? Now I'm imagining, you know, people just sitting in a house made of CDs, like trying to plug the rain.
Yeah, it is a little bit like that. But mine's probably a little bit less glamorous. It's not that glamorous. I mean, you do get to travel, but it's hard work at the same time. So it's mostly kind of like European festivals that you get to go to, but it's grueling, like especially, like France, Spain, their festivals finish at like 5 a.m. You've got to turn in copy by like 10, and then you've got to go do it all again the next day. Like, it's really good fun, but it's hard work.
Yeah. What about you, Alexis?
I don't think it's glamorous, but that's because the vast majority of it isn't. It's the same as Dom. I'm sat in my back room of my house trying to get my work done in between my kids going to school, my kids coming back from school, because then if you're trying to work when your kids are back from school, this is not something I'm telling you all this.
Don't have kids.
Don't have children.
If you take anything from this.
You know, and so there's a lot of time me sort of storming up and down the stairs screaming at my children to shut up, because it's vitally important what I've got to say about Taylor Swift. Much more important than them enjoying their lives. The travel is great. The travel, it can be great, or it can be actually quite boring, which is a terrible thing to say because you sound jaded and, you know, decadent or something like that.
Travelling not on a Friday night. That was the thing you were saying on Facebook.
I don't like being away from home on a Friday night. No, I don't. I don't like being away from home, to be honest with you. But you know, you get in. Also, sometimes it seems more glamorous than it is. Earlier this year, I went to Las Vegas to do an interview and also to go to the world's biggest super club, which is called Hakkasan. And the night I went to Hakkasan, it wasn't the most miserable night of my life, because that was when I got picked up for underage drinking by the police when I was 17, got taken home to my parents' house while they were having a dinner party. My dad's boss was there. That was pretty fucking bad. But there was a point. I've been to this, I was on my own, I was in this club, it was like, you know, and they said you're going to get all this VIP treatment, that's great, and they wouldn't even let me in at first, so the VIP treatment did not happen at all. I'm just stood on my own. I'm 43 years old in the world's biggest EDM club. It cost me, I shit you not, 20-something quid for a gin and tonic in this club. I went back to the hotel I was staying in on my own, a miserable time, stood at the bar, and I was just having a drink at the bar, and then a prostitute tried to pick me up. And at that point, I thought, this trip has got to be bottoming out, because it gets no worse than being sat on my own in Las Vegas, fending off the attentions of a prostitute. This is just absolutely wretched. You know, I could be at home watching Location, you know, things to do.
But who thinks that sounds pretty cool?
It doesn't sound cool.
I don't know, just throwing that out there. Something else I'd like to know, Mike, do you think fandom, like being a real bona fide music fan, or having a particular thing about a particular band can get in the way of being a proper critic?
Definitely. I've seen it firsthand, whereby members of the press have absolutely just been almost like infatuation, almost like, you know, 60s teenagers and the Beatles kind of stuff about bands, and you kind of have to say, well, you can't do them anymore. It's good to have that. Like, I have bands that I love to pieces, and you know, and you might write 1 or 2 pieces about them, and then you get to a point where, like, right, I'm not going to do that anymore, because it means that all the things that are coming out through this particular publication have got my name at the bottom, and it's a little bit weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's good, and I think everyone does get. I think everyone who works in music journalism, probably in music PR and just in music in general, probably has 1 or 2 bands that they get obsessed with at some point, and then everything blossoms from there, you know. Like, you could be like, you know, when I was 12, 13, that was when Nirvana were massive, so you suddenly start reading about all the other bands they're friends with and stuff like that. And you know, anyone who grew up through Britpop was the same. And I mean, what's popular now? Taylor Swift, right?
Oh yeah, huge.
So like,
She's very big.
She thanks fans in her liner notes. Yeah, like things. I don't know. Does she?
I have no idea. What are you asking me for? I don't write a line of notes. That's Dom.
You wrote. But you used to read, you know. So
yes,
yeah,
no, I know what you mean. You leave from one thing to another.
You used to have them with labels as well. You know, you'd be in a particular label and you knew that they were friends with these labels, but bands toured together and stuff. I don't really know how it necessarily works now. Even during the MySpace years, you could be like, oh, they're top 8 friends for all bands I might be interested in as well. So there's other ways of doing it. So I don't think it's an obstacle if you're professional enough to park that a little bit. You know, my favourite band in the world is whatever, and an opportunity's come up. Are you professional enough to go, okay, well, they should do that?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it is just going to be a love letter to this band who might have written their 6th album and it's a bag of shit.
Your advice, Lauren, perhaps you first, your advice to these guys, some of who would like to write about music, actually write reviews of albums and gigs and stuff for a living? Hands up. There you go. So what would be a piece of advice that you would give them in getting started and making some sort of an impact?
I mean, this sounds really stupid, but just start doing it. Don't say that you're going to start doing it, just do it. Set up your own blog. It doesn't matter if you end up having to like pay for your first couple of tickets. You get the experience of writing and kind of email people. Don't be afraid to just unsolicited email people. Be nice, be knowledgeable, but just do it. Don't pretend to do it.
Very good. Don't pretend to do it. I'm going to use that. Right. Dom.
I think the most useful thing that someone said to me when I started doing this, which I probably would have done anyway as a matter of instinct, is when I'm going to review an album, is make sure that I listen to it properly at least twice. It sounds like an obvious thing to say, but you can tell by reading a lot of people's reviews in magazines and stuff that A, they haven't listened to it once properly, let alone twice, but that they were probably doing other things at the time because they'd missed the interesting things about the record. And that's kind of your job, it's not just to kind of pull everything apart and ruin it for everybody in advance, although that is part of the fun. But it's listening to music rather than hearing it, and I see that a lot with some of the people who email me at Metal Hammer saying, is there any chance I could write for the magazine? And you read the reviews and it's obvious that they've kind of heard the album and then like people have been saying, you know, kind of written what they thought was, you know, what they would expect us to want to publish in our magazine rather than their own actual opinions. And sitting and genuinely absorbing music, I sound like an old fart, but it does strike me that that's something that people don't do as much anymore. Because when, you know, back in the dark ages when we were children, you know, you had a vinyl album and you sat and listened to it 50 times, you know, and without distraction. And now, obviously, you know, it's hard for me not to get my phone out every 2 minutes myself, and I'm 42, so it must be even worse for you lot. It's just really letting the music surround you and not be, you know, distracted by anything else while you're doing it, and then decide what you want to say. Actually have something to say. It's not just a list of songs with a quick description for each, which is another mistake people make. You know, but if you can't think of anything to say, then listen to it again. But actually have a point to make, especially if it's a really funny point that makes you look really clever. That's the best thing.
Alexis.
I totally agree with both the things that have been said. I think Dom's right. The more you listen to something, the better. Will sharpen your opinions about it. The more you listen to something. If you start out and you quite like something, you know, it'll grow on you the more you listen to it. There's something about it that niggles you a little bit. The more you listen to it, that'll develop into a really strong opinion. You'll hate it, and you know what I mean. That will sort of sharpen what you've got to say about it. And write. That's the thing. Get off your arse, do it. Doesn't matter. It's dead easy. Set up a blog. The more you will only get better at writing by writing, and you know, and it might take a really, really long time. But the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. It's as simple as that.